Good morning. Those of you who know me and those of you who don't know me but can see my title up there will be wondering why I'm talking about humanities and social sciences, since I'm very much a biomedical science publisher. But I am publishing director at Taylor & Francis, and I'm chair of the ethics committee there. Taylor & Francis is a big publisher of 2,500 journals, of which the majority are under the Routledge imprint, and the Routledge imprint is Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences. We are the biggest publisher and probably, I would say, the most respected publisher of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences journals. And when I joined a year and a bit ago, it was clear that the sort of feeling around COPE and Taylor & Francis, in Taylor & Francis, was very much, well, what do they do for us? And so I started chairing the ethics committee, and I've been trying to inculcate a love of COPE within Taylor & Francis. And so I've been having conversations with Chris and Natalie and about how we can make COPE much more relevant to publishers like us, because I think it is really, really important. So that's why I'm here, but I agree that I'm not the obvious person. So just looking back at the history of COPE, it was established by a group of medical journal editors. It's published, the original types of publication it published, or advice it published, were around medicine and put together by medics and physicians. The Code of Conduct in 2004 actually said they asked editors to take seriously their role as guardians of biomedical science. So the history is very much based in biomedicine. And although I agree great strides forwards have been made, there's a lot more humanities, social sciences, arts journals represented within the COPE membership, and there has been work done to try to make stuff much more relevant to those journals, but also, you know, the content of the flowcharts is, of course, relevant to all disciplines. The COPE membership survey in 2015 still has a lot of comment around this is for science, this is not for humanities. And so I took out a few of those quotes that described that COPE was far more relevant to a scientific journal than to ours, a central point of contact and advice for publisher-wide discussions and policy formulations as they apply to the ethics of scientific publishing. So there's still that perception, and what we need to do, and I know that COPE's been trying to do it, and I want to help try and do that, is move that perception away from being it's all about science to being it's all about publication ethics for whoever needs them. And I think part of the problem is that a lot of the people who are running those journals don't actually perceive that there are ethical problems they need to be looking for. So they're not looking for stuff, and they haven't had necessarily the education to look for some of the ethics problems. So again, in the research report that was done in 2015, you won't be able to see the detail, but it shows that the perception of the prevalence of ethics cases in the arts, humanities and social science is very much lower than in, for example, medicine and veterinary science and things like that. But our experience at Taylor & Francis is that despite the fact that only a third of the cases logged were AHSS, 83% of the cases which have been dealt with by our legal counsel this year have been in humanities and social sciences. So the ones that we get, we may not get that many of them, but they are the more serious ones. They are ones that, in the end, require our lawyers to get involved. And when you look at the leaderboard of Retraction Watch, of people who have had to have retractions for misconduct, 5 of the top 20 are from non-STM subjects. So there is a problem there, and we do need to take our responsibility for doing something about it. And I think, you know, a lot of it's about taking what we have, which is written still in a very sciencey, medically way, and writing it in the way that feels comfortable for the people who we're trying to get it to. So, for example, there's a lot about authorship disputes, and we have actually written stuff around, you know, taken the non-STM points of view into the authorship disputes documentation, but it's not that, you know, it talks about science first and sticks a bit of, you know, this is what Arts and Humanities says in it, rather than saying we are presenting something for that audience. So there are different definitions of authorship in Arts and Humanities to what there are in science. Plagiarism, I think, is plagiarism wherever, although the way that you use quotations in some humanities subjects are going to be very different to the way you use quotations in science. Human subjects, again, same rules around ethics approval, but they need different language. And there's been some discussion, I saw something on Twitter today about the use of social media in research, and there's a lot of work going on in humanities around that. Do we have any advice about that? I suspect not. And in Arts and Humanities, we're finding that there's a lot more libel and defamation type problems, because when you're focusing more on the subjective analyses of people's views rather than data, you're more likely to say things about those views which might end up being libelous or defamatory. And so that's a big problem. And I don't actually think that COPE should be telling people what to do in libel and defamation cases. They should, except for saying, this is when you need to go to your lawyer. But even that is an important thing to be telling our editors, giving them the tools to say, this is when you need to be really worried and you need to go and talk to someone who is a lawyer about it. So what are we going to do? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is, or the next thing we're going to do, is we're going to put together, and in fact, the Outreach Committee only just heard about this, so this is something that I talked to Natalie and Chris about, but we haven't talked about any more detail. Taylor and Francis have offered, or Routledge has offered to host a seminar with COPE in late 2017, based in the USA, to bring together experts to talk about the specific needs of the AHSS editors and how COPE can support them. And so really get the academy to tell us what they need, and then to put together some plans on what we need to deliver to them. So, you know, these things might be guidelines and training which are specifically for their problems and which are written in the language which is clearly for them. More cases which are covering AHSS in forums and digests, so getting them to come and to bring those cases. We are very much encouraging news about these topics in the digest, and so you know, we would encourage you to bring as many of those pieces of news into the digest, so that, or to send information so that we can actually look at covering more and more in the digest, so we make everything much more interesting. So I'm interested in what else we could be doing, because I think there's a lot more we could be doing, and this is my plea. So that's it.